Our first reader is the author of, most recently, of How to Speak Midwestern, a past Tuesday Funk reader and Gaper's Block contributor. He has also written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Chicago Reader, where he was a staff writer. He has lived in Rogers Park since 1997 and can often be found at Saul Cafe or the Lighthouse Tavern. Please welcome Ted McClelland.
Thank you very much. I promised Andrew I would wear the Chicago flag t-shirt. I'm going to give a Chicago-centric reading here about what's happening to the Chicago accent. First, I need to explain one little thing about, has anyone ever heard of the Northern Cities vowel shift? All right, yeah, we got one person there. So it's said to be the most significant change in English vowel pronunciation in 1,000 years, and it's happening right here in the Midwest. And the two most significant sounds are what's called the raised A, and this is how I learned I had an accent when I was at the University of Michigan. Someone told me I said can, it's sand. And then there's the fronted O, which makes us say box. So these are new sounds in the English language. Inland North, that's a dialect region we're in, was once considered standard American speech, so much so that the Southern linguist Raven McDavid dubbed it swine, standard white Inland North English.
That's stereotype.
This is no longer the case, due both to changes in the accent and to its home region's loss of economic and political power. The Northern Cities vowel shift, which was less advanced in the 1920s than in later generations, has made Buffalonians, Clevelanders, Detroiters, and Chicagoans sound more distinct from the rest of the country, so much so that Saturday Night Live parodied it in 2 sketches. Bill Swirsky's superfans made the Bears a national catchphrase and exaggerated the fronted O's of Chicagoans. One of the characters was a Southside Irishman who pronounced his name Todd O'Connor. Another sketch, less well known, but named after my hometown, 1-600 Lansing, a parody advertisement for a phone sex line for men who like sexy South Central Michigan accents. The animated sitcom Family Guy once did a cutaway bit about a Wisconsin nymphomaniac who cries, "Oh God, oh God, oh crap, oh crap," during sex. Perhaps as a result, some younger urban Midwesterners have been altering their speech to sound less regional, says David Durian, a native of Chicago's suburbs and adjunct professor of English at the College of DuPage. In Chicago, for example, the tendency to replace TH with D or T, known as stops, has been diminishing. It was a product of the fact that most European languages do not contain the TH sound, known as the interdental fricative. Remember that. Not even the Irish mastered it when they switched from Gaelic to English, and so D's, dem, and do's, or tree, troop, and tanks, or troop, well, we still have troop will always be with us, became common pronunciations in immigrant communities. In fact, these, dem, and do's guy is a term for a certain type of down-to-earth Chicagoan, usually from a white South Side neighborhood or an inner-ring suburb. But it's becoming less frequently heard among speakers born after 1970. The 60-something auto dealer who sold me a Ford Escape, Brademan Ford in Glenview, did it, but his 20-something assistant didn't. The same is not true in some blue-collar neighborhoods and suburbs, though. During reports, some younger speakers in suburbs such as Brookfield or Riverside, and city neighborhoods such as Bridgeport continue to use it. I used to go to the track with a guy from Burbank. Whenever I cashed a bet, he'd exclaim, "That's awesome!" Blame its demise in middle-class speech on the superfans. It's become so stereotyped as a pronunciation, and it's pointed out so often in speech that some people are actually shifting away from it. This feature of the Chicago accent was most widespread during the city's industrial heyday. Blue-collar work and strong regional speech are closely connected. If you graduated from high school in the 1960s, you didn't need to go to college or even leave your neighborhood to get a good job. And once you got that job, you didn't have to talk to anyone outside your house, your factory, your tavern, or your parish. A regular Joe accent was a sign of masculinity and local cred. Bonding force is important for the teamwork of industrial labor. A 1970 study of steelworker families on Chicago's east side found that women were less likely than their husbands to say these, them, and those because they dealt with doctors, teachers, and other professionals. After the mills closed, kids went to college where they learned not to say that and took office jobs requiring interaction with people outside the neighborhood. And I have an anecdote that's not in the book. I went to a bar at 100 and Western. It's called Wrong's Tap during a Bears game in search of the classic Chicago accent, and I found it. I mean, this was everything like the Superfans plus the F word, the N word, and the J word. I'll talk about the J word later. And the score, they were playing the Jags, which was just fantastic. And the score at the end of the first quarter was 13-10, and one of the guys said, what are the squares for this quarter? 0 and tree. So that's how you count on the south side, 1, 2, tree. And then I got back on the train to go downtown, and I met a guy who was in his 30s, and he was a firefighter from Mount Greenwood. And if anyone's entitled to a Chicago accent, it's a firefighter from Mount Greenwood. But he didn't sound even Midwestern at all. And he said, yeah, my dad has one, but my mom beat it out of me. She didn't want him to sound unsophisticated. So in fact, Durian is beginning to hear the Northern Cities Fellowship weaken among young middle-class speakers in the Chicago area, born after the late 1970s. Durian has been finding that the short O box vowel is backing up among some younger middle-class speakers, bringing it closer to the caught merger. Well, most people around the country pronounce those two words the same. We don't in Chicago. While the short A, after being raised a little bit higher by each generation of Chicagoans since the early 1900s, seems to have plateaued among young middle-class speakers. However, young working-class Chicagoans still use the same fronted O's and raised A's as their parents and grandparents. To those interested in the connection between accents and cultural identity, there's something poignant about the Superfan sketches. They captured that accent and the people who spoke it at a time when both were ceasing to define what it meant to be a Chicagoan. In the mid-1980s, when the Superfans' beloved coach Mike Ditka led the Bears to the Super Bowl, the city's steel mills were closing, threatening the livelihoods of Chicago's working class. After a half-century of Irish mayors, City Hall was under the control of an African-American, Harold Washington, who was almost unanimously opposed by white ethnics, the community most associated with the classic Chicago accent. Chicagoese, as newspaper columnist Mike Royko called the dialect, was the language of hardworking, traditional, church-going, neighborhood-loyal people who would advance from immigrant to middle class in 2 generations. Ditka, himself a Slav from a Pennsylvania steel town, understood and was part of the team's appeal to his fellow ethnics. He dubbed his players Grabowski, suggesting that like a Polish plumber or steelworker, they were tough pluggers who got the job done. The classic Chicago accent is heard less often these days because the white working class is less numerous and less influential than it was in the 20th century. It has been pushed to the margins of city life, both figuratively and geographically, by multiculturalism and globalization. The accent is most prevalent in blue-collar suburbs and in all-white neighborhoods in the northwest and southwest corners of the city, which are heavily populated by city workers whose families have lived in Chicago for generations. Beginning in the 1990s, Chicago became a regional business and financial capital, attracting college graduates from Ohio and Indiana who speak a more neutral strain of Midwestern. It has also attracted third-world immigrants who are not adopting the classic accent. As what it means to be a Chicagoan changes, so does what a Chicagoan sounds like. So that's half my book is sort of a linguistics lesson, and the other half is glossaries from every state. And how much time do I have left here?
Couple minutes, yeah.
All right, so I want to read some of the terms that we only use here in Chicago. 16-inch, uniquely Chicago brand of slow-pitch softball that caught on during the Great Depression for 2 very practical reasons. The bigger, softer ball didn't travel as far as a standard 12-incher, so it couldn't be hit out of tiny urban parks, and it could be caught barehanded by fielders who couldn't afford gloves. Each summer, Chicago emergency rooms see a spike in walk-in patients with jammed or broken fingers, most of them still wearing their softball jerseys. What's happened to you? Clout, political influence used to evade rules that must be followed by the less well-connected. Possessors can obtain no-bid contracts, police department promotions, admissions to selective high schools, and other favors. Both a noun and a verb. A political sponsor is a clout, formerly known by the politically incorrect term Chinaman. The late newspaper columnist Mike Royko provided proper uses of the term in a 1973 column. Hey Charlie, I see you made foreman. Who's clouting for you? Or ever since my clout died, they've been making me work a full 8 hours. I've never worked an 8-hour week before. And of course, dibs. In Chicago, competition for street parking is fierce, especially in the winter. If you shovel out a space on your block, you call dibs by blocking it with lawn chairs, crates, sawhorses, or other cast-off possessions. Became an accepted practice after the 1967 blizzard, which hit the city with 23 inches of snow. Drivers who violate dibs are likely to find key tracks on their paint jobs, or worse. And of course, Gaper's Block. A traffic jam due to motorists rubbernecking in an accident, also known as Gaper delay. Goo-goo, a derisive term for a political idealist, traditionally used by Roman Catholic regulars to belittle Protestant reformers who wanted to clean up the city's machine, usually by eliminating patronage, short for good government. Hundreds. Every Chicago block encompasses 100 street numbers, measured from the city's 0 point. Thus, Belmont Avenue, which is 32 blocks from Madison, is 3,200 north. Irving Park is 40 blocks from Madison. Many Chicagoans would say it's not 4,000 north, but 4,000 north, because one block equals 100. Therefore, 40 hundreds. Let's see. Wear the jacket. During a political scandal, an underling who takes the fall for his boss's misdeeds is said to wear the jacket. Geez, the building department hired a union president's 19-year-old son as an inspector. Who's going to wear the jacket for that? All right, here's a character we've all seen shopping around the corner of Damon and Armitage. Trixie. A usually blonde-haired young woman living in Chicago's affluent Lincoln Park neighborhood. Preoccupations include shopping at spendy boutiques, drinking cocktails at the bar associated with her Big Ten college, and summer weekends at the Michigan cottage of boyfriend Chad's parents. In her 30s, Trixie marries Chad and moves to the suburbs, becoming Deerfield Trixie. All right, well, that's a good one to end on. So, thank you very much. I've got some books for sale. You can catch me at the intermission. I'm gonna have to go after that. But thank you.
Yeah.